Hello and welcome to this Monday, August 19th, 2019 episode of the Grab ATTN podcast. This is a Gary V Club podcast, and today's episode is about tripling down on what you are good at. And there are things I'm going to be covering. The first is you can still win even if you're, the 800th of what you want to talk about, what you want to do. It doesn't matter what number you are. It doesn't matter if you're first, doesn't matter if you're second. It just matters that you solve problems and serve others in a unique way, in your own unique way. The next is best always wins. And what I mean by that is that the market is the market. And while there are some times where the best product isn't the most popular, ultimately the best businessman wins. Business person wins. Person that puts together the best end-to-end solution to make buying the easiest. The last is create content based on your talent. That goes for the platform, the type of content, etc. If you can be on everything, then you should be. But you've got to go based on your time, your talent, your resources, all those things. Now, this podcast is something that I'm working to differentiate from Gary V's offerings. I'm talking about Gary V, I'm talking about grabbing attention, but I want to put my own unique spin on it. So I have a different voice than Gary V. I may talk slightly different. I may talk about slightly different things. But the point of it is that I'm inspired by him. He inspires this podcast, and I watch his content, and then I make a podcast accordingly. And this tripling down on what you are good at is something that we all need to really focus on. We all need to think about this a lot deeper than we have, because most of us haven't really thought about it. I mean, so many of us are told that we need to fix our weaknesses, but how many of us are really working on our strengths, really working on our crafts to really, and are we choosing crafts based on our strengths, or are we choosing our crafts based on what other people tell us? Ultimately, I think that you need to triple down on being you, being uniquely you, being the thing that makes you you. And it takes time, it takes energy. It's not something that we always just intuitively know. Sometimes we do, and then it gets pushed out of us. So there's that relearning ourselves and reintroducing ourselves to ourselves. This doesn't happen overnight. One of the biggest things Gary talks about is patience, and that's the thing that I push on people the most, is everyone is impatient. I'm impatient, extremely impatient. But I've noticed that people are very impatient, especially when they pay you money. And if you don't pay them money, if they don't pay you money and then you start accepting money, it can cause a lot of problems. And it's really interesting because the habit of doing more than paid for is something that Napoleon Hill teaches. It's something that I talk about and go over a lot, but there's a balance. There's a balance between all of, the giving and the taking. It's not giving to take, but it's give, and ask. That's the jab, 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 jab. The jab, 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 right hook. Sorry, this cat is like rubbing all over me. There's hair all over me. So, once again, podcast distracted by the cats. And I think this is the biggest thing. The biggest differentiator between success and failure is you can sit and allow things to get in your way, or you can keep pushing through. And I'm very close to not doing any more podcasts out here with the cats. because every time I get all itchy and I get irritable, and then my podcasts suck. And I really want to push this on people to understand that your personality is something that you need to fix. No one likes hair all over themselves, but it's also no good to be irritable when you're covered in hair because it doesn't matter. Because I don't really matter. No, I mean, I've got some people listening to this podcast, but are you listening it? Is it going to be affected by the hair on me? No, but it is going to be affected by my attitude. And a lot of people don't like Gary's attitude. And Gary talks about this. You know, if he just talked a little bit differently, didn't cuss and stuff like that, he could get way more people. And I want you to understand what kind of person I am. I like animals, but I'm not this freakish, like super deep animal lover. I used to be as a kid. I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then just as time went on and I started being around animals and trying to do other things, it's begun to frustrate me. And this is my own issue. It's not the animals. It's my own issue because it's like this cat has no clue that how hairy it is. And as the owner, I mean, I didn't choose the cat, my wife did, but I chose my wife. And just because, you know, people say, you know, that's not my job. And in reality, as a husband, these are my jobs. And until I can afford someone to, you know, clean up and stuff like that, or afford to get my wife, you know, take her out of her job and either work alongside me or, I mean, that's ultimately what it's going to be because she's not really the type to not work. She enjoys working, and most people do. And I mean, that's the whole point of getting her away from her job is so that she can be more assistant to me, so that she can do things like take care of the cats. I mean, in reality, we've got to start thinking about how we are going to employ the future of people, what kind of work they're really going to do. And there's going to be a large group of people that just absolutely, you know, in the past, when I was a kid, it's like, oh, yeah, I would have loved to have, you know, I wanted to own a zoo when I was younger because I loved animals so much. And it's like if I wasn't so focused on all the other stuff, yeah, I'm sure that the animals I would love a lot more. You know, when I don't have to care about hair all over myself, it's like there have been dogs and stuff like that. My mom's dog in particular, that's very hairy, and you know, I would be covered with him, and if I just don't care, that's what I found. It's like I wear the same stuff in here into the camper because I know that it's going to be covered in hair the first time I come in here, and I'll clean up, and it's like you've got to stay on it every single day because one day of not staying up and it starts looking chaotic, and then days, if you go days, it's like a disaster area. And this is about developing self-discipline and habits. And there are so many people that have habits of keeping up on things, and then they get so wrapped up in other things that they are like, well, I'll get to that later. When I just have this, I'll focus on that. And in reality, it's like it has to be a daily habit from the beginning. And when I'm wealthy and stuff and can afford other people to take care of my pets, that's another thing. But you have to be extremely wealthy to have someone else take care of your pets. I mean, I've cleaned other people's horse barns for them. So my dad had a horse, and in order to have his horse boarded somewhere, he had me clean all the stalls. It was a really odd agreement, but I would drive 45 minutes each way and clean up after these horses, and I would spend like 3 hours, 4 hours a day, depending on the day. And then by the time I go home and shower and clean up, and it's like you put the same clothes on and you go do it, and you're just in this grind of doing it. And there are some people, like, the thing is, it's like, if you're living, working, playing, loving, learning, and paying it forward, it's okay. But when you start losing certainty for that living, when you start losing the variety of play, when you start losing the connection and love, when you start not being able to pay it forward and give back because you're too busy wrapped up in the other stuff, it gets you all over the place. And that's why you've got to triple down on what you're good at. Because it's like, you can spend so much time on things that you're not good at, things that you don't like, that are just frustrating to you. It's like, no one likes cleaning up poop. But you can enjoy cleaning up a horse barn. You can, I listened to Gary Vee. That's when I really started listening to Gary Vee, was in that horse barn. And that's how I tripled down on what I was good at. Instead of saying, look, I'm wasting all this time each day. My dad was paying me kind of, but it was really discombobulated because of how everything was. And it just didn't make sense for him to be paying me so much for that. Like, the whole agreement didn't make sense. And it was because no one was tripling down on what they were good at. He's great at construction, and he was, focused on horses, and I pushed him to do that because it was his passion. But the construction stuff got put aside, and part of that was the real estate market. And now, one of my first podcast of the day was about cooperation versus competition. And I cooperated with my dad for a long time. And now I'm starting my own business, not in direct competition because I don't really know what he's working on, but in my own capacity, because cooperation is very hard. And it's very hard for me to cooperate with people, which is probably not a good thing to say when I'm trying to attract partners and employees and customers and investors. But I want people to understand that I am working on these things, and I'm not going to put up with nonsense. I want people to triple down on what they're good at, what they're passionate about. But if their heart's not in it, then they shouldn't be doing it. And that's the thing, is I don't really, all my life, my dad told me he didn't want me to be in construction, and he wanted me to be in technology because that's what, I was good at, triple down on what I was good at. Well, now, because I've spent so much time in technology, in construction, I've become good at it. And I'm not as fast as other people, but I'm reaching that level of mastery in my craft, and combining that with technology because of my life experiences, because I've been in both of those industries. And it's like, I do a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there. And it's over the last decade, or the last 15, 20 years, I've developed this interesting skill set. And so now at 32, I can really triple down. So by the time I'm 33, I'm double tripling down on what I'm good at, and really pushing this forward, because I'm working on building villages, building communities, not just houses, not just buildings, but taking the space that's needed and using technology to make it available. It's hard because there's this balancing act. There's this balancing act of shipping and designing, because you eventually need to ship to stay in business. And sometimes it's like you feel like you're gypping the customer, but you need to say, okay, well, just because it's not perfect to me doesn't mean that it's not perfect to the customer. When I'm working to help feed, house, and empower 1 billion people over 30 years, I've got to think about this in practical terms. And what I mean by that is I've got to ship products. And Gary Vee has been great at shipping products. He had a recession-proof business, and marketing is sort of recession-proof as well, because people want to spend more on marketing to gain business, but they may cut back on marketing. When the recession hits, Gary's just going to triple down on what he's best at. And in this recession, it's pretty much guaranteed, because the fear is being created more each day. More fear is going to be created until we are in it. And the only way out is to create your own future, is to triple down on what you're good at. And that's what the Happy Hero Studio is about. HappyHeroStudio.com. But it's about a space for people to unleash their creativity. And, this is like a prototype unit, and unfortunately the cats are in here. And I was talking, sort of negatively about the cat hair and stuff earlier. The idea is that you have two spaces, and I have two spaces here, but they're not ideal. They're not right because of how this is set up. They're both halfway right. And it's really hard finding proper housing. I look at available housing daily, and it's like finding something that fits my needs is nearly impossible. It's like the stuff that fits my needs is really expensive, and I need inexpensive to fit my needs. And it's like the stuff just doesn't make sense. Things just don't add up because of laws that don't add up. And that's why I'm tripling down on this, to help change the way people look at tiny spaces. Gary, had like, I don't know how many relatives, 10 relatives in a studio apartment or something like that. You're talking about a couple hundred square feet and all these people living in it. I don't know exactly his situation, but in China, they do the same thing. In Mexico, they do the same thing. Even in America, that's where he was at when this happened. It's that Americans that have entitlements don't understand. Oh yeah, just 100 years ago, there weren't cars. There weren't self-driving cars. Just, 15 years ago, everyone didn't have this extremely powerful computer in their pocket that allows telepathy with billions of people worldwide. There's still billions of people without internet and without Facebook and stuff like that don't have that connection. There are parts of the world that are just completely cut off from us. And I mean, how many of these people even know about tripling down on what they're good at? How many of these people even understand that there's this different kind of life? I think a lot of people just get up and live their life for the day. I think a lot of humans are very much like animals, where they're just working to get the food for the day, the food and shelter for the day, until they die. And we don't have to be like that anymore, because we've kind of we haven't hit it for all of humanity, but we've hit it for the humans that want it. The humans that want the freedom in life to live on their terms. It's now truly available, unlike ever before. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about helping you break free to enjoy the life that you want. Thank you for another episode of the Grab ATTN podcast. This is a Gary Vee Club podcast, and I hope that this helps inspire you to triple down on what you're good at, to have patience, to understand that you're going to have frustrations, that things are, not your job, but you're just going to have to do it. Your wife may love cats, and you're just going to have to take care of cats. It's an extra half hour of time in your day or whatever. But it's life. like, that's what I want people to understand. Like, there are going to be things that distract you. There are going to be things that just are frustrating that you don't want to have to deal with, that you don't think you should be having to deal with. But in reality, there's so much stuff that you don't have to deal with that 100 years ago you would have. Be grateful. Be grateful for the opportunity you have and do your best to help others. That's the reality of it. Do what you can. Thank you and have a great day. I appreciate you.